Okay. We are going to talk today about, well, a couple different things. Essentially, the progress of the debate between Jay Dyer and myself. Not debate. There's no formal debate, so don't run away with that. Just we talked about essence and energies, and we got talking about, the debates around it and why it's not debated very often. He gave me stuff to read, uh, which I did, mainly Palamas and his works, and his dialogue with the Balamite, and surrounding texts around that. So the Palamite, the Palamite councils or synods, however you want to say it, and writings that other people have done. But then, obviously, being Catholic, I read some Catholic stuff around it. So I read Aquinas, and his take, Boyer. Um, then I went and read some non theological works around this. And as I progressed through this, I started realizing pretty quickly this is not just a theological thing, which is great for me because my degree is not strictly theology, it's actually theophilosophy. So, or Christian thinking, depending on what college you go to. It's hyper metaphysical. Not only that, but it gets into physics as well. So, and obviously metaphysics, but it does really touch on our understanding of physics. And so I started going down a rabbit trail of some old documents I had written, some old papers and stuff on when I took physics courses through Oxford. So I just had some old papers. And then I looked at some theological works that I had done at Moody. And then I looked through some note taking that I had done through the early church fathers. And then I did a few other things, some more research, and out popped a new metaphysical paradigm. I was not trying to make peanut butter, but I did, kind of thing. What's interesting is because for me, some context or background here is I don't love the full scope of Thomas Aquinas's understanding of reality, of theology and stuff. There are so many aspects that I do agree with, but I would probably bend more towards Scotus. I would probably even bend further away from Scotus in some regards. I even might be holding in some things that I gathered when I was Protestant, which is, by the way, when it comes to metaphysics, is okay, as long as they're coherent and logical, obviously. But what I really did notice very quickly was the Palamite, Palamism, whatever you want to call it. This is like the Calvinist Armenian debate on steroids. Not in regards to like what it's saying, but just rather a lot of times we were saying the same thing with different terminology, and other times we were saying different things that can't be proven that are theorized. What I think is interesting of what I've found is a realization rather that this argument is actually centered around understandings of time. So some more context. I was a proponent of B theory for a long time. And we'll go through this sort of briefly in a minute, but in the last decade or so, especially after my long, lengthy work on Genesis, I started understanding that there was like time is not real, which everyone's like, what? Time is not real. What does that mean? Sometimes it rings people as like a flat earth thing, but it's a normal conversation to have in physics. It's not fringe. It's somewhere in between. Yeah. So I don't ascribe to A theory. I think A theory is wrong. And what was really interesting was you need to ascribe A theory in order for Palamite essence energies to be real, or to be true, rather. So I found that striking to begin with, and I was happy to see that this wasn't strictly a theological or exegetical argument, that it was more than that. So this paradigm, what am I talking about? I'm going to give you guys just a brief thesis or synopsis, and then we can go through, because I'm on page, this is a 57 page document of my theory. I'm not going to do that. I literally have like a paragraph, and I'm going to read that, and then we're going to talk about a few different things. So it's the Hyperflux-Eternalism Model. Super fun name to say. Doesn't really mean anything other than the flux and eternal part. It is a metaphysical framework designed to explain the structure of reality, divine action, perception, and participation without relying on temporal or sequential causality. It is rooted in the assertion that all of existence is grounded in a single, eternal, unchanging act, which is perceived differently by finite beings through the mechanism of flux, or veil, or the flux of a veil. The purpose of HEM is to articulate a coherent, unified theory that maintains divine simplicity, accounts for creaturely freedom, and explains all phenomena without requiring God to change or react. Here's what's very interesting about this is my own model made me change my view because I don't love divine simplicity. Like just like a knee-jerk reaction to it. I don't like it. Exegetically, like I just don't like it. It's a problem to me. Like it's always been a problem. What I found was a lot of my problems were solved when I started formulating in this model. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with essence and energies? Everything, because it's how God interacts and how we perceive God's divinity and how we partake in that divinity. And if you don't think that has anything to do with time and physics and metaphysics, the door is that way. It has everything to do with this. It's not strictly a theological conversation. It can't be. You immediately get into it. So I'm going to address a couple of things. Mainly the metaphysical axioms axiom that comes with this. There's, let me see here. There's 9, 10, there's 11 categories, okay, of things I just want to briefly talk about. So one, the metaphysical axiom. So God is the eternal act, which is in line with Aquinas. He's indivisible, immutable, and complete. He does not change, react, process, or unfold. I am who I am, Exodus 3:14. Not becoming, not adjusting, but pure, timeless, because time does not exist. So it is rejecting the notion that God is outside of time, and rejects, number 2, rejection of time as an ontological reality. So Hem affirms that time is not a substance or a real medium. What we call past and future are collapsed fragments of the eternal act filtered through the finite creature's epistemological limits. So think about it this way, real quick. I have a lot of examples I could throw out. But the reason why time, there is no past, future, or even present is that no matter what scale of time you're on, so if you go down to the very smallest, it doesn't give you present. It's either about to or was. There is no present. And then we reject, obviously, time theory A that has the eternal past. So time, I know it sounds weird, but time does not exist. But now, again, this isn't weird, and this is going to sound weird to the lay and maybe theologians, but in physics, this is just a conversation. So non-time theories in physics, like Julian Barbour's The End of Time, where time is an illusion produced by how states relate. What's very interesting is this gets proven more and more as we go, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So then what does flux mean? What is flux defined as? Flux is the phenomenological veil through which finite minds perceive change, motion, and causality, though none exists ontologically. It is not a thing, not a force, not an accident. It is the mode of distorted reception of the eternal act, like bent light through warped glass. Quantum coherence and wave collapse. So, well, that's number 5. Actually, let's do number 5 first, and then we'll go back to number 4, because I think logically it will proceed, but I could be wrong. Non-locality and divine immanence. So quantum entanglement shows space and separation are not fundamental. So reality is non-local. This got proven, Nobel Prize given, done. Meaning it's unified underneath apparent distance. In my theory, God is not in one place or another. His act is omnipresent but veiled. Um, so this, what you'll find as we talk about this in coming videos, is how this solves so much of the divine conversation, both exegetically and philosophically. So what we call divine presence is not God moving. So I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just going to stick to the script here. God is not moving, but the veil thinning. The kingdom of God is with you, or within you, Luke 17:21, not because it entered you, but because it was always there, just veiled. Going back to number 4, quantum coherence and wave collapse. Hem corresponds to quantum mechanical principles. The universe exists in superposed potentials until observation collapses. The wave function. This collapse is not the production of something new, but the reduction of relational possibility in the perceptual form. So what that means is, going back to the non-locality, if nothing is being observed, it is not, the wave function is not collapsed. Therefore, it does not act. This can get into superpositioned totality. This can get into superpositioned potentials and things like that, but not in this video. So God's eternal act is the superpositioned totality of all relations. What we experience as event, grace, or choice is a relational collapse of that act within the flux. So then, how does dark matter and dark energy? This is sort of like a subset category we haven't fully worked on yet, as the veil architecture for everything. So modern physics, 95% of our universe is invisible, so is either dark matter or dark energy. It shapes perception, gravity, and expansion, but is undetectable by direct measurement. These are not divine substances, but cosmic veil structures. They define the limits of what collapses visibly. The eternal act's visibility is throttled or mediated through these veiling forces. This frames theophanies, sacraments, and mystical experiences as localized veil thinnings, not God showing up, but reality unveiling. So when God presents himself to somebody, a theophany, or even in the sacrament itself of the Eucharist, he's not showing up as we would anthropomorphically say, but reality is thinning and unveiling to absolute reality, which is obviously God. He is ever present. We already know that. We already admit that, omniscient, all these things. So to say that he shows up in any way is just ontologically wrong off the get-go. And this solves that. So number 7 is the epistemological reconciliation. All creaturely knowledge is veiled perception of the one act, the divine act. Revelation does not equal God deciding to speak. Grace does not equal God adding something to us. Sacraments does not equal God acting anew. They are instantations of alignment where flux collapses rightly and the eternal becomes perceptible. That's the key thing. The eternal act, or the eternal divine becomes perceptible, right? Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Stop echoing chaos, let flux quiet, and the veil thins. This is literally mysticism, right? So when you read the mystics, they talk about removing chaos and removing everything from the mind. And that is when, in the East, this is when, the light of Tabar or anything like that occurs. This veil thins because we remove chaos. Now, chaos and order play a huge role in this theory. Human will. This is actually brought up by my friend Tony. He said, what happens with human will? Essentially, if all is the eternal act, how are we free? Freedom is not temporal autonomy. It is relational distinction with the act itself. You are not God, but you are held, intended, and personally upheld as a true I. Your yes or no is real, not because you escaped the act, escape the matrix or anything like that, but because you were willed to exist as a personally distinct participant. You can read Acts 17:28 for that one. So then we get into incarnation, the Eucharist and sacraments, mysticism, which we already talked about. So there's a lot to go over. Again, I said 50 some pages of stuff like this. I've done the unified scriptural understanding. Second all of a sudden, 2 Kings 6 made way more sense to me, right? When Elijah's talking to his servant, he says, "Oh Lord, open his eyes that he may see." The chariots of fire don't appear; they were already there. They didn't come into our reality. Like no one else sees them, right? They're hidden by the veil of flux. They're hidden by that veil, and the way we interpret it is a localized veil collapse, not a divine reaction, because obviously all is that one divine act. The eternal act, which includes angelic presence and divine protection, was present but unveiled only through noetic alignment. Again, this is very Eastern, which is great because I don't want to, the idea of just going with the Western thought is just not where I'm at. I've never been that way, but I can go on and on. Again, 50 plus pages of this stuff. But that is the main core synopsis and understanding right now. And obviously, I have tons of footnotes, right? We could talk about the Constellation of Philosophy, Summa Theologica, Confessions, book 11. All these things play a part. Yeah, tons of stuff. But kind of recircling back to Jay Dyer and the Palamate view, I could attack it two different ways, and I think I could just talk about why a theory is wrong and how that collapses his view, or I could talk about this and say, hey, like I have potential melding, a potential new understanding of this, which I'll probably do. I don't think attacking a theory, I don't think he's going to want to do that anyway. So, but the fact that we live in a non-local universe hasn't been talked about theologically very much. I did write one other paper about that with the transcendental quantum argument, which was my most viewed paper ever, basically. Hopefully this one beats it. But it's not even a paper right now. It's literally just a library of everything. So if you guys have questions, send them down below. I would love to engage you guys with them as much as possible. But expect more videos on this in the coming days, weeks,